Has the WNBA lost its magic without Caitlin Clark? This season, the league faced a major challenge, keeping fans engaged once its brightest star was no longer on the court.
But the fact that the ratings from Caitlin Clark's series to these series fell off a cliff, it should surprise no one.
I'm watching the Indiana Fever game. I'm just waiting on Caitlin Clark to catch the basketball.
I'm going to go in there and I'm going to try to be the best. I get y'all saying best player in the world. That's great. It looks great. But I want to be the best person. I want to be the best.
After the Indiana Fever, led by Caitlin Clark, were eliminated from the playoffs, everything seemed to change. Viewership plummeted, excitement waned, and players like A'ja Wilson struggled with the lack of fan engagement. But why does one player seem to have so much influence over an entire league's success?
Let's just say the ratings aren't the same with Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever now eliminated. Game 1 of the Aces Liberty matchup on Sunday drew an average of 929,000 viewers. Was down nearly 50% from last Sunday's Fever Sun contest. By the way, not only was viewership...
The numbers tell the story. When Caitlin Clark's Fever exited the playoffs, viewership dropped dramatically. Game 1 of the highly anticipated Aces Liberty matchup on Sunday drew an average of 929,000 viewers, a 50% decline from the previous Sunday's Fever Sun contest. And it wasn't just the TV ratings. Attendance at live games fell off a cliff as well.
All I gotta say is she's lucky this UConn team isn't healthy. And that's a true statement.
That's not, that's wrong, Molly.
Monica?
That's wrong, Molly. Molly,
like
it's
five
excuses.
top players,
It's
am I
excuses,
right?
Molly. It's
Major
excuses.
injury.
You would not be saying that if it wasn't UConn.
Major stars not playing.
Listen,
You
excuse
gotta
me,
go.
it's her against Caitlin Clark.
Stephen A.
Ain't no excuses.
Stephen
You
A.
got there.
Wait a
No,
minute.
want to hear that now.
Stephen A.
Let me tell you, if
Paige
Georgetown get
Beckers-
back in the mix, I'm going to be insufferable. I'm just telling you that now.
What?
If Paige Beckers didn't basically miss 2 seasons, I don't know if we'd be talking
Come on
about
now.
Caitlin Clark the way
The buzz that had surrounded the WNBA's postseason vanished almost overnight, with fans left wondering if the league could sustain interest without its biggest draw. A'ja Wilson, star of the Las Vegas Aces, was among those affected. The loss of viewership after Clark's departure wasn't just a blow to the league, it also impacted Wilson's own presence in the playoffs. In an interview, Wilson expressed her frustrations, admitting that this year had been the worst in terms of people labeling her game as boring.
The reason 12 million people are watching ESPN for a game, if that game was on CBS, they probably would have had 25, 30 million people watching.
Like we're not going to be seeing Caitlin Clark play basketball again for another 200 days. An ESPN reporter said at the end of the Indiana Fever Connecticut Sun Game 2 that Caitlin Clark almost definitely will not be playing basketball this offseason. So no overseas and no 3-on-3 unrivaled.
Her dominance on the court wasn't enough to keep the fans engaged once Clark was out of the picture. And despite Wilson's efforts to maintain her performance and leadership, it was clear that the playoff spotlight was dimming without the Fever's star. The decline in excitement was felt across the WNBA community.
Been legitimate resentment emanating from those who are pioneers. Nobody's fooled here. You got pundits who used to play in the WNBA, some of them who didn't, and who was speaking on behalf of those who didn't want to create that kind of noise themselves because of the negative impact. We talk about it when the men do it. If we detect jealousy, if we detect envy, if we detect resentment, and it's amongst the fellas, we put it out there. Shit, we act like it's the latest episode of General Hospital. But when the ladies are feeling that way about another young lady like Caitlin Clark, and people like myself and Shay Shay call it out, suddenly it's a...
The Aces' semifinal matchup against the New York Liberty was expected to be a high-stakes battle. Yet, without Clark, the narrative lost its appeal. The Aces were eventually knocked out of the playoffs, and with them went one of the league's biggest stars, Wilson. Without Clark to draw fans, the playoffs felt lackluster, even though the remaining teams, including the Liberty and the Minnesota Lynx, had their own talented rosters. The significance of Clark's absence was undeniable. Throughout the season, she had captivated fans with her fiery gameplay, long-range shots, and impressive leadership. Her ability to take control of games made her a must-watch, and the Fever's run was one of the main reasons fans had been tuning in. When she was no longer in the picture, the playoffs seemed to lose their intensity. Even A'ja Wilson, arguably one of the best players in the WNBA, struggled to maintain the level of interest that Clark had sparked. Wilson, who had led the Aces to a strong regular season, felt the pressure of carrying the league's viewership on her shoulders. However, The Aces' elimination in the semifinals only served to compound the WNBA's problems. Now both Clark and Wilson, two of the biggest names, were gone, and with that, much of the audience's attention went with them. It wasn't just fans who noticed the shift. Pundits and former players alike, some even going so far as to suggest that Clark's absence exposed deeper issues within the league. For years, the WNBA had been fighting to grow its audience, relying on its stars to carry the weight. But Clark's swift rise to stardom seemed to underscore just how fragile that success was. Once she was gone, so were the viewers, and it became clear that the league's appeal was closely tied to individual players rather than the overall quality of competition. In contrast, Wilson and the Aces were trying to downplay the image. Wilson, in particular, spoke about her desire to be known not just as a great player, but as a great person and teammate. Yet, as viewership continued to fall, it became harder to ignore the reality. The WNBA was struggling to keep fans engaged without Clark, and the ratings reflected it. In one of the most watched seasons in recent memory, it was almost unthinkable that the playoffs would face such a sharp decline in interest, and yet that's exactly what happened. The WNBA's reliance on Clark became even more apparent as the playoffs dragged on. Without her star power, the games felt flat, the matchups less intriguing. This was supposed to be the pinnacle of the season, the time when the best teams in the league battled it out for a championship. Instead, the playoffs felt like a shadow of what they could have been if Clark was still in the mix. For many, Clark's impact on the league went far beyond just her performance on the court. She brought a new energy and excitement to the WNBA, drawing in fans who might not have been regular viewers before. Her magnetic personality and undeniable talent made her a household name, and she quickly became the face of the league. But with her gone, it was as if the WNBA didn't know how to maintain the momentum she had built. The Aces, despite their own impressive run, weren't able to fill the void left by Clark, and when Wilson and the team were eliminated, it was almost the final nail in the coffin for this year's playoffs. Fans who had been invested in Clark's journey suddenly had no reason to continue watching. The Liberty and Lynx, while both strong teams, didn't have the same star power to keep viewers engaged. As a result, the WNBA finals were shaping up to be one of the least watched in history. The sudden drop in viewership after Clark's elimination isn't just a blip on the radar, it's a serious issue that the WNBA will need to address. The league had been riding a wave of increased popularity, thanks in large part to Clark's breakout season. But with her gone, that wave has crashed, leaving the WNBA scrambling to figure out how to keep fans interested moving forward. For the league, this moment serves as a stark reminder of how dependent they've become on their star players. Clark may be the face of the WNBA now, but what happens when she's no longer around? How can the league build a sustainable fan base that isn't reliant on one or two players? These are the questions that the WNBA will need to answer if they want to continue growing and competing with other major sports leagues. In the end, Caitlin Clark's exit from the playoffs was a turning point, not just for the Indiana Fever, but for the entire WNBA. Her absence exposed the league's vulnerabilities, and the sharp drop in viewership was a clear indication of just how much she means to the sport. For fans, her departure marked the end of an exciting chapter in the playoffs, and for the league, it was a wake-up. As we look ahead to next season, one thing is certain: the WNBA needs Caitlin. Without her, the league faces an uphill battle to keep fans engaged, but with her, the possibilities are endless. The question now is, how will the WNBA respond? Will they find a way to capitalize on Clark's star power while also building a more sustainable model for the future? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure: Caitlin Clark is the key to the WNBA's success, and without her, they may struggle to stay relevant in the ever-competitive sports landscape.